Luke chapter 6, I'd like to read again all of Jesus' sermon beginning at verse number 20. And our text will deal with verses 43 through 49, the last part. But I'd like to read the whole thing again. That way we understand the whole thing in its context and place. Verse number 20 says, "And he," that is Jesus, "lifted up his eyes on his disciples and said, Blessed be ye poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are ye that hunger now, for ye shall be filled. Blessed are ye that weep now, for ye shall laugh. Blessed are ye when men shall hate you, and when they shall separate you from their company, and shall reproach you, and cast out your name as evil for the Son of Man's sake. Rejoice ye in that day, and leap for joy. For behold, your reward is great in heaven. For in the like manner did their fathers unto the prophets. But woe unto you that are rich, for you've received your consolation. Woe unto you that are full, for ye shall hunger. Woe unto you that laugh now, for ye shall mourn and weep. Woe unto you, when all men shall speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets. But I say unto you which hear, love your enemies. Do good to them which hate you. Bless them that curse you. Pray for them which despitefully use you. And unto him that smiteth thee on the one cheek offer also the other. And him that taketh away thy cloak forbid not to take thy coat also. Give to every man that asketh of thee. And of him that taketh away thy goods ask them not again. And as ye would that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise. For if ye love them which love you, what thank have ye? For sinners also love them that love them. Love those that love them. And if ye do good to them which do good to you, what thank have ye? For sinners also do the same. And if ye lend to them of whom ye hope to receive, what thank have ye? For sinners also lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love ye your enemies, and do good, and lend, hoping for nothing again, and your reward shall be great, and ye shall be the children of the highest, for he is kind unto the unthankful and to the evil. Be ye therefore merciful, as your Father also is merciful. Judge not, and ye shall not be judged. Condemn not, and ye shall not be condemned. Forgive, and ye shall be forgiven. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure that ye meet withal, it shall be measured to you again. And he spake a parable unto them. Can the blind lead the blind? Shall they not both fall into the ditch? The disciple is not above his master, but everyone that is perfect shall be as his master. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but perceiveth not the beam that is in thine own eye? Either how canst thou say to thy brother, Brother, let me pull out the mote that is in thine eye, when thou thyself beholdest not the beam that is in thy own eye? Thou hypocrite, cast out first the beam out of thine own eye, then shalt thou see clearly to pull the mote that is in thy brother's eye. For a good tree bringeth not forth corrupt fruit, neither doth a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. For every tree is known by his own fruit. For of thorns men do not gather figs, nor of a bramble bush gather they grapes. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good. And an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is evil. For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaketh. And why call ye me Lord, Lord, and do not the things which I say? Whosoever cometh to me, and heareth my sayings, and doeth them, I will show you to whom he is like. He's like a man which built an house, and dig deep, and laid the foundation on a rock, and when the flood arose, the stream beat vehemently upon that house, and could not shake it, for it was founded upon a rock. But he that heareth and doeth not is like a man that without a foundation built an house upon the earth, against which the stream did beat vehemently. And immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great. For, of course, the past 3 weeks, I believe everybody's been here, We've been looking at this sermon Jesus has delivered. He delivered it to his group of disciples, this larger group of disciples. So he went up to the mountain, they picked the 12, and as they're coming down the mountain, they meet this large group, and they wanted Jesus to heal them and preach to them, and Jesus was doing that, but then he turned his attention directly to this larger group of his disciples, maybe in the hundreds or close to, and he says, to you, this is my message. So, today, he's going to end his message with 3 potentially, I say potentially, brutal revelations. The 4 points, as I said, for Jesus' sermon, the 4 messages we've gone through, in verses 20 through 26, there's disciples in name only, and then there are true disciples of Jesus. In verses 27 through 36, true disciples of Jesus love others like Jesus, not like the world. In verses 37 through 42, true disciples of Jesus behave differently than others because they are following Jesus' words and example. And then finally, in verses 43 through 49, the true disciples of Jesus will be evident by their comparison with the disciples that follow Jesus in name only. So today, I have 3 sentences that summarize each one of the 3 points. So the 3 sentences are this: your fruit proves who you really are. Your actions testify to the authenticity of your words. And your foundation will determine your future. So those are the 3 sentences summarizing each of today's 3 points. There's one sentence, however, that summarizes all of today's message into one. And that sentence is this: your fruit, your actions, and your foundation all validate whether you are a true disciple of Jesus or if you only claim him in name only. So with that in mind, let's work through this last section. First, we see the fruit. The fruit. Verses 43 through 45. For a good tree bringeth forth, For a good tree bringeth not forth corrupt fruit. Neither doth a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. For every tree is known by his own fruit. For of thorns men do not gather figs, nor of a bramble bush gather they grapes. And the response, the analogy, and then this is what it truly is, what he's talking about. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good. And an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is evil, because out of the abundance of the mouth, or of the heart, his mouth speaketh. So the illustration that Jesus uses here, trees, thorns, bramble bushes, it's an analogy for works. Not works for salvation, but works that are a result of salvation, or works that are a result of the lack of salvation. And he opens with the reality that, hey, good trees don't bring forth corrupt fruit, and because a good tree is well rooted, it's reached its roots out, it's got the water it needs, it's healthy, it's thriving. And it would be illogical for a good tree with all these good things to consistently bring forth rotten fruit. Fruit that would leave a bad taste in your mouth, let's put it that way. And in the same vein, Jesus says this: corrupt trees, bad trees, don't bring forth good fruit. If a tree's weak, sickly, poorly watered, rotting, you would never go to that tree and say, ooh, I hope this is a good apple. You're going to say, that's probably not going to be very good because the tree's not very good. You would logically expect bad trees to produce weak and sickly fruit, and you would logically expect good trees to produce tasty and healthy fruit. Now, I don't know trees like some people do. Some people can walk up to trees and say, yeah, that's a bad tree. Yep, bad tree that needs to come down. Yep, bad tree that needs to come down. And you're like, looks fine to me. And they're like, no, it's a bad tree, trust me. Because they've learned trees and they know what those things are. But even though I don't know trees, if you give me a piece of a tree's fruit, I can taste the fruit and then I could say, maybe there's something wrong with that tree. Or, man, that's a good piece of fruit. Man, that tree seems pretty good. Thus Jesus states, every tree is known by his fruit. If you want to know about the tree, go check its fruit, and you'll get a pretty good idea of the true health of the tree. See, the production of fruit has everything to do with the health of the root system, with the amount of water that it gets. Is it getting plenty of sunlight? Is the climate too hot or too cold? Is the soil that it's in, is it too much clay or too much sand? It all has to do with all these things. These things all add to whether or not the tree is going to be healthy or not. And depending on how healthy the tree is, that determines how good or bad the fruit is going to be. Now, Jesus makes the statement at the end of verse 44. For of thorns men do not gather figs, nor of a bramble bush gather they grapes. What he's saying here, in keeping with what he just said, every tree is known by its own fruit. Now he somewhat switches it and he says, I don't go to an apple tree and expect peaches. Well, I recently planted an apple, plum, and peach tree. I'm not going to go to the peach tree and say, hey, give me a good plum. No, walk 30 feet away and get the plums from the plum tree. And for the same thing, you don't go to the apple tree and say, hey, I'd like a nice blueberry today. No, you go over to the blueberry bush. That's the point. Every tree is going to be known by the fruit it produces, and every tree is going to produce the fruit it's supposed to produce. The apple tree is not going to be like, you know what? This year we're going to trick everybody and we're going to produce blueberries. That's going to get them. That's not how it works. So every tree, whether good or bad, will be known by the kind of fruit it produces, and you will know what kind of tree it is based on the kind of fruit it produces. And then, of course, Jesus takes this analogy that he gave them and says, now here's the picture. Here's what I'm talking about. A good man, out of the good treasure of his heart, brings forth that which is good. And an evil man, out of the evil treasure of his heart, brings forth evil. For of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaketh. Just like you're going to be able to tell the difference between good trees and bad trees based on the fruit that they produce, you're going to be able to tell the difference between good men and evil men by the works that they do. See, something that's rotten on the inside can only be hidden for so long. When a tree starts to rot on the inside, we generally aren't going to be able to go up to it. Some people may be and say, oh yeah, it's bad. We're not going to see it right away. It's going to take years. And then all of a sudden you're going to look at the tree and you're going to be like, wait a second. When did that tree rot? Because it's been rotten on the inside. And the rotten stuff inside continually eats away at the healthy stuff until all of a sudden you see the whole thing's rotten. Rottenness grows. And evil men that contain evil in their heart, they might try and hide their evil for a time, but in some way or another, the evil will always work itself out. Because what's in your heart is going to come out of your heart. The more evil you put in your heart, the more evil is going to start oozing out. Though you may try and hide the evil, and though you may do good things here and there, the perceptive person, the person that's watching, will pick up on the things and say, that was weird right there, and that tasted kind of sour, because the evil, the rotten on the inside, will eventually see the light of day. Alternatively, the more good that is in the heart, the more good is going to come out. It goes both ways. A tree with a healthy core is going to continue to produce good fruit, and it's going to continue to grow. Maybe not by leaps and bounds when it did younger, but it's going to continue to grow. See, the more good we put in our hearts, the more good's going to come out. And maybe the better way I should put that is, the more Jesus you put in your heart, the more Jesus is going to come out. So, your fruit proves who you really are. and your fruit and your actions and your foundation will all validate whether you are a true disciple of Jesus or if you claim him in name only. So number one, the fruit. Number two, the fake. Jesus immediately follows up this truth about fruit by making this statement in verse 46. And why call ye me Lord, Lord, and do not the things which I say? In other words, all of you are following me, and we're going from place to place to place. And I'm teaching, and I'm healing, and I'm teaching, and I'm healing. And I'm telling you what to do. And you all keep saying, Lord, Lord, which is another way of saying master, meaning they're saying, when they say Lord, Lord, they're saying master, master. They're saying, you're the one to tell us what to do. And here Jesus says, you keep saying that, but you're not doing that. The evidence isn't there that you're doing what I said. And so this leads us to the point where we can say this means one of two things. The fact that they're saying, Lord, Lord, but not doing what Jesus says means one of two things. The first thing it could mean is they are just simply disobedient disciples, which is possible. And that's the best case scenario, that they're just disobedient disciples. They're truly disciples, but for some reason they've gotten their eye on something else and they've started chasing a rabbit somewhere. However, what Jesus is about to say in this specific instance is probably going to dispel us from believing that they're simply disobedient disciples, because in reality what he meant is the second thing, and that's the fact that they weren't even really disciples in the first place. See, what was in them was coming out. Oh yeah, they verbalized with their words, Lord, Lord, but what was in them was coming out. Where they built their house was being revealed. So even though they kept saying, Lord, 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 their lack of fruit in following what he told them to do, their lack of action, their lack of works that are evidence of their salvation, revealed that in their heart they truly weren't with him. And I quoted the verse back at the beginning of when we started studying this 5 weeks ago it was, with the stop for Easter. From that time, many of his disciples turned back and went and did other things. Why? They really weren't disciples in the first place. See, everything proceeds from the heart. Both true professions and fake professions. And I'm not trying to say that there's fake professions here today. This is just the passions that we've come to. But it is helpful for us to always examine ourselves and verify that there is evidence of fruit in our life, or if we've gotten distracted by something else in the world. It goes back again to what we said. There's only two groups of people in this crowd of disciples. Those who say, Lord, Lord, and do what he said, and that proceeds out of their heart. And those who say, Lord, Lord, and don't do what he says, and that also proceeds from their heart. John Phillips made the point that the British government is a constitutional monarchy, which is opposed to an absolute monarchy. So it used to be an absolute monarchy. A king or queen sitting on the throne, making all the laws, changing the laws, doing whatever they want, telling the people what to do. But in a constitutional monarchy, you have the parliament makes all the decisions. They make everything. So there's still a king or queen on the throne, but they don't make any decisions. They have zero control, zero power, even though they're on the throne. For some reason, our world makes a big to-do about the royal family over there. And they're given the ability by the parliament to sign some papers and say, oh yeah, the king wrote this into law, or the queen wrote this into law. But they didn't really do it. The parliament did. They just looked like they were doing something. See, the king sits on a throne and looks like he's great and grand, but behind the scenes, somebody else is doing all the work. And there's a lot of people in this crowd in front of Jesus that day that said, "Look at the king! Long live the king! Lord, Lord!" But in reality, they were still making all the decisions. They'd say, "Jesus is the king of my life," but in truth, they weren't doing what he said to do. And when we combine the criteria of the fruit and the reality of their actions, or inactions, if you will, we're left with the reality that they're fake. Because their actions testify to the authenticity of their words. And the scary reality is that there's a lot of people that run around in churches today and say, "I'm a Christian. I prayed a prayer once. I grew up in church. My family did this, or we went there, and we give this." But when we look at their fruit, when we examine their actions, we find out they're fake. Because their actions or lack of actions testify to the authenticity of their words. But there's hope. Because Jesus didn't stop there. He didn't just leave off with that verse. No doubt, there were many in that crowd that day that were convicted by what he had just said. But in that moment, Jesus sees the opportunity to tell them something simple yet profound. He used that moment to teach them that they could be a part of that crowd that didn't produce fruit and weren't doing the actions they were supposed to be doing, but they didn't have to stay that way. There was hope. He says in verse 47, let's look at verse 46 again. "And why call ye me Lord, Lord, and do not the things which I say? Whosoever cometh to me, and heareth my sayings, and doeth them, I will show you to whom he is like." See, the end of verse 46 ends with the scary reality that there's people in the crowds that would profess Jesus with their words, but not with their life. And verse 47 opens with the joyous reality that no matter the circumstances that they were in, they could come to Jesus right then and right there. They don't have to remain in this hypocritical life. They can truly turn to Jesus right now. Jesus says, "Come to me. Whosoever comes to me." Anybody that wants to come to me can come to me. Come to me. Hear what I say. Do what I tell you to do. And that's still today the path to Jesus. No matter whether you would profess Jesus or not, and I believe everybody here does, the reality is you can come to him, hear what he has to say, and respond to his offer. And what he says is this: "No man cometh unto the Father except by me." What he says is, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And what he says is this: "Him that cometh to me, I will never cast out." So today, I ask you, have you come to Jesus? And if you haven't come to Jesus, you must do that. I also ask, are you just professing Jesus in name only? And if so, I urge you to come to Jesus and stop living a lie and start living a real, authentic life. For those that have come to Jesus, we'll get to our steps in a moment. So number 1, the fruit. Number 2, the fake. And number 3, the foundation. Verse 48 says this. He says, whoever comes to me, here's what I say to do, and does it. This is what he's like. This is what true disciples are like. They're like a man which built an house and digged deep and laid the foundation on a rock. And when the flood arose, the stream beat vehemently upon that house and could not shake it, for it was founded upon a rock. But he that heareth and doeth not is like a man that without a foundation built an house upon the earth, against which the stream did beat vehemently. It's coming one way or the other. It's coming to everybody. Everybody's going to face it, the storm. But this man's house immediately fell. And the ruin of that house was great. Again, Jesus makes it very clear there's only 2 groups of people. Those who hear and do, and those who hear and say no. And these two groups of people respond to Jesus' words in two ways. One group listens and then goes and does what Jesus says, and one group listens, they hear, they don't listen though, and they go out and do whatever they want to do. Jesus says the group that goes out and does what he says, they're like a man when he wants to build a house, he takes the time to guarantee that the foundation has been dug down. He digs down to where he's supposed to dig down to, lays the footers down in the ground, below the frost level, down to where the soil is hard and compact and is not going to move, and then he builds the foundation on top of those. Because he does this, he anchors the foundation on a rock because he knows the rock's going to stand. The rock's not going anywhere. The rock has the power and authority to stand up to the power and authority of the storm. And so he builds his foundation on the rock. And just as he knew was going to happen, the storm came. And the house he built was unshaken because its foundation was established on the rock. But then the other group goes out from hearing Jesus' words and they say, no, I'm just going to do what I want. I'm just going to live however I want. And Jesus says, you're just like another man who went out to build a house, but instead of taking the time to ensure that he builds the footers down and builds it on the rock, he just says, we'll just stick it right here and builds it. Might look just as beautiful as the other guy's house did. In fact, it may look even more beautiful than the other guy's house did. But when the same storm came, as it did to the other guy, the man's house, he says, immediately fell. It didn't even have a chance to try and withstand the storm because it was done. It says the ruin, which means destruction, was great. A total loss. Here's what Jesus is saying. I am the rock. And if you don't build your life on me when the storms of life come, you're going to find out that everything you built your life on is going to come crashing down immediately. But because I am the rock, if you build your life on me, when the storms of life come, you're going to find out house is still standing because it's established on the rock. Here's the reality. Where you put your foundation, what you secure your foundation to, will determine your future. If you say, I'm going to build on the rock, that's going to determine the future of that house. But if you just say, I'm not going to build on the rock, that's also going to determine the future of that house. One's going to stand, one's going to fall. The key is whether it's built where it's supposed to be built. And I'm going to say this twice, just so we understand. When Jesus is everything, it does not matter when everything on earth leaves, because you still have everything. However, when everything else is everything, it will matter a great deal when it all leaves, because then you will have nothing. When Jesus is everything, it doesn't matter when everything on earth leaves, because you still have everything. But when everything else in the world becomes everything, your job, your family, your home, your hobbies, everything else you do becomes everything. When it all leaves, you're left with nothing. So let's put it all together. Your fruit proves who you really are. Your actions testify to the authenticity of your words, and your foundation determines your future. So your fruit, your actions, and your foundation all validate whether you are a true disciple of Jesus or if you claim him by name only. So then we ask the question, what do we do? What should I do? One, examine your fruit. What fruit am I producing? Because I can determine what kind of tree I am by examining the fruit that I'm producing. If I'm producing bad fruit, maybe I'm not a good tree. Maybe I'm a good tree that's been convinced to produce bad fruit because I've been influenced by the world and all the things in the world. Examine your actions. You can determine whether your profession of Christ is true by determining, am I doing what Jesus said to do? Or am I just doing my own thing? Living life how I want to live my life. And examine your foundation. Is my house going to stand against the storm by examining whether my foundation has been established on the rock that is Jesus? Or on someone or something else? After you've examined yourself, I already mentioned what you should do. If you don't profess Christ as your Lord, or if you only profess Christ by name only, you got to turn away from those things and turn to Christ and run to Christ today. For the person that examines themselves and figures out and finds, I am established on the rock. My actions are what Jesus said to do. The fruit I'm producing point to the reality that I am a disciple of Christ. For you, keep producing fruit. Keep growing. Don't stop reaching your roots out and soaking up the water, the life that is in the Word, and keep producing fruit. Growth is probably not going to appear just as it did when the tree was really young and you saw it grow leaps and bounds. And man, when I was younger, I grew spiritually leaps and bounds. It might not be leaps and bounds anymore, but it's one day at a time, little by little, finding out, I didn't realize that about Jesus. Oh, Jesus is so much better than I thought he was. Little bits by little bits. Keep producing fruit. Keep growing. Keep doing what he said. Keep adding on to the house. So one day when you stand before Jesus, you could say, this is all because of you. Don't stop examining yourself. Because you want to ensure continually I'm following his direction. And I'm not being sidetracked by all these things in the world. An example of fruit, actions, and foundation is this. Last night at 8:19, Bailey, I'm not sure how the last name is pronounced, Coughlin, I think it is. She died, 22, last night. She's been on life support for 2 weeks since she tried to take her own life. Her parents, however, are Christians. And we don't know if Bailey was or not. They hope and pray she was. But it's not necessarily about Bailey. It's about her parents. Because they were the ones that are faced with the decision, what are we going to do? What are we going to do now that we're faced with our daughter that has taken her own life? Do we keep her on the ventilator? They say there's zero hope. What do we do? We're finding out right now what their fruit is. We're finding out right now what their actions are. And we're finding out right now where their foundation is. Because they're losing their daughter. Their children are losing their sister. Their grandchild that's 2 years old is losing his mother. And they're determining right now, we're looking into their lives and we're able to see this. Their fruit shows they're in Christ. Their actions show their life is trusting Christ. They're doing what Jesus said. We can see where their foundation is laid and where it's anchored to because the decisions they're having to make are constantly brought back to the foundation that they've been built on, the rock. So examine your fruit, examine your actions, and examine your foundation. Am I in Christ? Am I a true disciple of Christ? Am I just talking about him and going along with the flow of these other group of people? Where did you build your foundation? Let's pray.